they're going to hear it.
Yeah, there is cameras and video.
Can I put it here? Yeah, except that then this is a problem.
Take it to
Okay, you got it. That was better.
Oh, Kevin Hawks. We got a cheers. Hey.
I'm going to be the only one using this. Down there? Yeah.
It's probably pretty on the head. And so I usually say because also visible
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started, so if you can settle in. Great. Okay, this is great. We had 107 folks register, and looks like most showed. That's great. Plus, this is being streamed, so there will be others watching in other places. So, good afternoon and welcome to our conversation about our journey to creating a thriving workforce. I'm really glad that so many of you come out today. First, I'd like to acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabe peoples whose traditional territory we are meeting on today. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connections to this place. So, some of you, I know many of you, but some I may not. So, my name is Don O'Leary. I'm the Vice President of Finance Administration and Risk here at the University, and I'm Chair of the Wellness at Work Advisory Committee. And on behalf of the committee, I'm really pleased that you're all here today. So, we wanted to take an opportunity, and I will take a few minutes before we get into the panel conversation and discussion, to give you a progress on our Wellness at Work initiatives to date, and to highlight some of our next steps as we move ahead with a strategic plan that we're going to introduce to you today. So part of this update, we've also invited a panel of university leaders to share some of their promising practices and successes, challenges and aspirations when it comes to workplace wellness. Our president, Facarino, will be hosting this conversation with our panelists as we move through today's events. And I'll take about 20 minutes to begin. It'll be about an hour and a half of the panel conversation, and then I'll wrap up with 10 minutes or so at the end. I hope some of you, I see only a few of you, and two of those comments are from me, so if you get a chance, if you could take a chance to participate in our conversation boards and answer some of those questions. That's good feedback for us to learn more about some of your opinions about your contributions to wellness at work and how you're doing to create a positive change in your workplace. Okay, and as well, setting up over here, we have a person from our employee and family assistance provider, Homewood Health, and she's joined us today. And if you have any questions, Homewood is here today as well. Glad to have you. Okay, so many of you are aware that tomorrow is the annual Bell's Let's Talk Day campaign. This year the theme is Every Action Counts. We know that helping to end the stigma around mental illness and increasing mental health literacy can help create positive change. So before we get started in talking about my update on wellness at work, I'd like to start with a short video from Clara Hughes, who we're all, I'm sure, familiar with, about the stigma of mental illness and a call for action for all of us to do better.
I think that there's an incredible stigma attached to mental health issues, to mental illness, because it's so invisible. So many people have come and asked me for help with mental health issues, either for themselves personally or for a family member, a friend, a coworker, someone that they care about, because they just don't know what to do. And then I meet so many people. They might tell one person, and that person may have been me that day that they finally told, I'm going through this, I'm really struggling, I don't know what to do. Most people, when they're struggling or confused, they don't know what's going on. And so the judgment is there, I think, because of misunderstanding, lack of education, and plain ignorance. And we need to be better. I'm not going to stop because it matters, because I think there's a shift happening. And we need to keep pushing, to keep the momentum going, so that every element of our culture, of our society listens and changes and lets people's voices be heard. I think
many of you know Clara's story, whether it be as an Olympian and her struggle with mental health. And if you don't know her story, take the opportunity to learn more. She has been a leading voice of education about mental health and someone who has helped to break the stigma of mental illness. So today we're going to talk together about how we're creating a safer, psychologically healthier workplace and what we can do to make things better. I'm going to first, though, give you a quick snapshot of some of the things that we've done with our wellness initiative over the last couple of years. So up on the screen there now is the Excellence Canada Healthy Workplace Model. This has been instrumental for us in that we followed this to a T as much as we can because it does outline the 4 pillars of a healthy workplace. Physical environment that we work within, mental health and workplace culture support, social responsibility, and healthy lifestyle. And you'll see with the things that we've done to date and the strategy that we have going forward, they're very much anchored in those 4 pillars. So the drivers of those 4 pillars and dealing with these issues that have been identified, or these pillars that have been identified, it takes leadership, it takes planning, it takes programs, it takes progress, it takes some risk, and it takes people like you to be engaged. So it's critical that all these drivers happen if we're going to support the 4 pillars of a healthy workplace. So we've been at it now since 2016. A wellness advisory committee was established at that time. Some of you may not know that was really initiated and driven by union leadership here that were really concerned about mental health support for employees. And I have to give full credit to the folks that were involved with the Joint Health and Safety Committee at that time that brought this whole initiative to our attention. Our initiative is wellness now. It's broader than just mental health based on the pillars that we've talked about, but mental health certainly is a critical part of our initiatives. So after we've been at it 3 years, we have an advisory committee. We have put together our mission, vision, guiding principles, all the things that you would obviously put together if you're going to take a logical strategic approach to what we've been doing. We've partnered with Excellence Canada, who have been wonderful in helping us with their certification program and the direction they've provided us over the last 3 years. In 2017, we branded ourselves as the Wellness at Work Initiative and set up websites, other promotional material, and we've had 100,000 page views of our Wellness at Work site. We have a network of wellness champions, and today we have over 90 champions. If you're a champion, just raise your hand, please. Great, several here. So congratulations and thank you for being a champion as part of our initiative. And if others are interested, we're always looking for more. And some of you will recall that in 2017 we had our first Healthy Workplace Month. At that time we launched our first work survey. We engaged employees in a survey to learn how people felt about the workplace, what was being supported, what was lacking, in terms of the what they call 13 psychosocial factors that determine a healthy workplace. Very good results. We had workshops, we provided those to folks, and they've been very instrumental in building some of the strategy that we have going forward. I'll talk more about that in a bit here. Also in 17, we got a Healthy Workplace Bronze recognition from Excellence Canada. And that year we also signed the Ecological Charter, which is an international charter of health promoting universities and colleges. It outlines our commitment to embedding health into all aspects of our campus culture. Not only from your perspective as employees, but also how we serve our students and how those initiatives can work collectively. 2018, moving forward, we held a bunch of workshops based on the results that we got out of the survey. We had 23 half-day workshops with leaders in their departments, colleges, and departments to learn how they were going to take the wellness results, survey results, and how they were going to use those to develop action plans in their areas. And I know at least 2 folks, I think, are planning to speak to those workshops and the results of those workshops and what they're doing. We launched Wellness at Work grants. We approved 39 grants that year. And that year we also took a focus on mental health with Be Well, Be Safe Week. And and then in 2019, the action and commitments and programming continues. We expanded programs, but we added new programs as well. And last year, 44 grants were awarded for various projects. We've launched training programs for leaders. We've had 40 campus community leaders take 2-day workshops called Leading for Wellbeing retreats. As I say, AVPs, deans, colleges and departments have been in a process of looking at action plans in their areas. We expanded some of our health benefits through human resources. Employee and family assistance programs were changed. Athletic subsidies were changed. We became smoke-free and tobacco and smoke-free campus. And we did develop our three-year plan going forward. Last 2 things, we received Excellence Canada's Silver Award last year, which was quite an achievement for us. And some of you may not know that in December we were recognized as Canada's Healthy Employer. So, we will be launching the grants again. I'm not going to spend a lot of time at them here now. There have been 83 awarded to date, and they can be up to as much as $3,000. Most of them are much less than that. They're $1,000, $1,500 for initiatives. But they've been wonderful and have been great initiatives. And we'll be launching them again, I think, next month. So I do encourage folks, if you've got an interest for your department, your area, and you want to make an application to do so. Finally, next. Going forward. We've been very focused on activities, we've been very focused on promotion, and that will continue. But we also think that we should be, our strategy should be more focused and strategic and based on the survey results that we got from everybody two years ago. So our strategy going forward has 4 goals. The first is to prioritize and enhance organizational and psychological health, and 3 key areas that needed to be addressed that you, all of you, and others identified was workload management, growth and development opportunities, and clear leadership and expectations. So those are big challenges. Those are going to take a lot of work and time, but those have been identified as 3 key areas for the future, and we'll do our best to address those. It won't be just us, it's all of us. The second goal was to provide all opportunities with opportunities to be and stay well. And again, huge variety of wellness programs and events and opportunities have been established and will continue monthly. Again, I mentioned the grant program, and we are certainly looking for partnerships and new ideas. So please, if you have any, please contact us. If you've picked up, if you're new to the university and you had some great ideas from another workplace, we're certainly interested in hearing about those as well. Our third goal is to build wellness leadership capacity at all levels. I mentioned already some of the leadership program and training that we've done. Again, leadership is becoming a champion and a volunteer, so again, if you're interested, we appreciate that. And also human resources will be rolling out a new leadership program focused on emotional intelligence, which will be launched later on this year. So those are some of the opportunities, some of the things we're into. And we're always looking to exchange and to facilitate between colleges and departments best practices, what's going on. And the champions have been very good at that, and will continue to do that. Finally, our fourth goal is continuously improve and evaluate the wellness culture at the university. Our survey that we did, engagement survey, was in 2017. We're looking likely at the fall of this year to go out again to learn from you if we've made any progress from 2017 and get further direction and from you in terms of what we should be doing. So that's sort of the highlights. We're always open to new ideas. You've all been tremendous. You've all participated. There hasn't been an event that I've gone to that we haven't had tremendous support for, and thank you for that. And you're always welcome to join us in any activity that we're putting together. So with that, I'll turn it over to Franco, and it's yours.
Great. Thanks. So why don't you pull that microphone out of there,
Okay.
and then take the stand with you too. That's great. Well, thank you very much, Don. Let me actually start out with a thank you, a shout out to Don and his team, particularly Don and the rest of the team for their leadership on this initiative. There are so many facets to it. There's so many layers to this particular onion, if you want to think of it, that kind of imagery that it's just been a very thoughtful approach, and at the same time getting a lot done. So shout out to Don and the team. Thanks very much for all that you do. So again, this is actually quite special for me because for myself, it's actually, I think, one of the first times that I've been in an event like this where my professional life in the mental health and addiction field is actually coming together with my role as president and in the senior leadership. So it's special. It's actually quite important. I really appreciate the opportunity. I do want to. It's interesting. A number of people have asked me, well, I keep hearing you've been involved in the mental health field and how so and what. So I'll talk briefly about my own involvement. Before I do that, I do want to introduce actually the panel here, and I'll start at the far end. Steve Hyman, the director of maintenance and energy and physical resources. Steve, great to have you here. We also have Irene Thompson, Director of Student Housing Services and Student Affairs. Irene, great to have you. We've got Allison Burnett here, who is the Director of Student Wellness Services in Student Affairs. And we were actually on a conference call last early evening, Allison and I, as well as David Lee, regarding the I keep wanting to say the SARS pandemic. Apparently it's not SARS, but it is another coronavirus. So we were on a call with COU, so thank you for that as well, Allison. We've got Indira Naidu-Harris, our AVP of Diversity and Human Rights. Great to have Indira here, and Irene. I mentioned, have I missed anybody? Oh, Gwen Chapman. Where's Gwen? Gwen Chapman's with us, of course, our Dean of the College of Social and Applied Human Sciences. Actually, kind of my boss, sort of on the faculty side of my then, as a member of the Department of Psychology, and I see some of my fellow psychology faculty here. So so that's the other identity she has. Good luck with that. But again, great to be here. Let me just briefly say a few words about myself, because people have asked how I've been involved in the mental health field. So I've been in that world professionally for about 30 years, actually, and initially in my capacity as a professor of psychiatry and psychology at the University of Toronto. And my own research has spanned the full spectrum. In fact, at one point in my career, I was funded by CIHR, previously Medical Research Council, then NSERC, as well as the social sciences and humanities. So my research has kind of spanned the spectrum. It's really embedded in the neuroscience piece. But really over the years has evolved to include clinical research. Also, at around, I guess, 40 years old in the mid-90s, I got involved in kind of the leadership side of things, and I was the last head of research for the Clark Institute of Psychiatry, and then apparently there was a merger going on, but nobody told me, and the Clark Institute merged with 3 other hospitals, and it became CAMH, that we all know about, and I was the first head of research in the newly formed CAMH. I can tell you a quick story about that because it's related to stigma, what Clara Hughes was commenting on. Interestingly, when that merger happened, you had kind of psychiatry and the addictions field coming together, so it was mental health and addictions coming together. And there were all sorts of fracture lines. The basic scientists didn't trust the clinical and social scientists, there were always different kind of groups. But what was interesting to me was the patients. Patients were kind of not sure about this merger. I may have mental health issues, but I'm not addicted, right? So there was like stigma among the patient population. And then conversely, on the addiction side, they say, well, I might have addiction issues, but I'm not a psychiatric patient. So it was just an interesting learning for me to see that kind of those fracture lines that you wouldn't normally think of. It was among the patients themselves. And over those years, I got to know Mary Deacon very well, who's the head of the Bell Let's Talk initiative. She was actually the head of the foundation at the time, the fundraising arm of the hospital. So all of that to say that it's been a huge part of my life, my professional life, but it's really spilled over into my leadership roles as well in big ways. And it's influenced, I would say it's influenced my approach to leadership. I think we're all products of our backgrounds, of our education, of our experiences. I'm no exception to that. And so, my kind of approach to leadership, I think, is affected by that background and those experiences. And if you ask me how, I would say, well, first of all, a sensitivity to understanding human behavior, I think, quite frankly, helps with kind of your patience and tolerance of certain kinds of situations, just being able to contextualize things. But the other is realizing how much we can do actually in our environments to affect change. I mean, if you think about most mental health challenges or issues, it's very difficult to actually separate mental health challenges from the environment within which you exist and work and play and live. So much of mental health challenges are actually defined in that context. So there's an intimate connectedness between our environments and the bars that actually create mental health challenges and stressors and that kind of thing. And I think as a last point, I would say probably a big influence for me is, I've been in the science world most of my life, and I can talk a lot about evidence-based. But I would say that, interestingly for me, probably the bigger learning over the years in the mental health field is combining that evidence-based kind of technical precision approach with just kind of basic humanism. Just a basic reminder to all of ourselves of our common humanity. And I think that's been a big part of my own thinking over the years. Just a couple of things that I also want to mention, that and then this will kick off the conversation with the panelists. And Clara Hughes actually mentioned it. She talked about stigma and the lifting of stigma. And I would say, if I think about the last 30 years, it's unbelievable how far we've come. still a lot to do, and has the stigma been lifted? Are people completely coming out of the shadows? No. But where we were in the 1990s and 1980s to now, our world's probably, it's just different. You know, I think about fundraising in the mental health field in the early 90s. And I was on the first fundraising campaign for CAMH. Michael Wilson was a huge champion for us, the past finance minister with Mulroney, who passed away last year. I mean, the idea of raising money in that field was almost impossible. I mean, we broke all sorts of barriers just in that one fundraising. But today, we're so much further ahead, still a lot to do. So one of the questions I think is worth for all of us to think about is, what will be the next part of the conversation? What will be phase 2 or the second stage of the conversation of mental health? Stigma, lifting stigma, coming out of the shadows is the first. We've got a lot of work to do, but we've made quite a bit of headway on that. What does the next stage look like? And I would suggest that one of the things that we should be thinking about is mental health literacy, precision, understanding the differences between severe mental illness, emerging mental health challenges, understanding functional stress versus dysfunctional stress, understanding what the tipping points are, not in some vague sense, but in a more precise sense. And I think that would contribute in a big way to helping us reduce misunderstandings. And we see it played out in our own environments. We see certain behaviors, they're misrecognized. We're open to mental health issues, but we don't actually, we haven't really double-clicked, as I like to say, on these concepts and get to a level of precision that we all have when it comes to physical illnesses. You know, we have a very clear sense, you know, there's diabetes, heart conditions. We have clarity around where the tipping points are. We have clarity around when, I think we have a general sensitivity around these things in mental health, but we don't have the precision, even though actually in many cases the actual information is there, but it hasn't been. So for what it's worth, I throw that out there as a bit of a thought in terms of how will the conversation evolve. So I want to start the conversation, and you've met the panelists that are with us, and again, I want to thank the panelists for being here today, and actually for giving me an opportunity to get the heck out of my office. And actually, this is actually quite enjoyable for me to be in this setting. So why don't I actually start out with Gwen, and Gwen, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little about how you see wellness, the wellness initiative in general. And by the way, you know, it's interesting, these words like health. You know, if you think, you know, 25 years ago, health was very medically defined 25, 30 years ago, and the rings of health are expanding. So when we think about One Health, our relationship with our environment, right? So things are expanding. So when you think about wellness with an eye towards mental health, tell us about how you connect that with your role here at the university.
Sure. Well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here today. As I was reflecting a bit on how I came into this, so, you know, as I was introduced, I'm the Dean of CSAS here, so our Social and Applied Human Sciences. So, you know, have a broad sort of oversight, both at everything from the strategic levels to the sort of day-to-day management levels for all of the things that go on in a college, whether that's academic, whether that's working with staff, whether that's working with students. So you know, there's a lot going on, and to bring sort of where does my wellness view come in from that, and I was really interested in your sort of talking about where you came from and how your sort of professional career has informed who you are in the wellness sphere. So my background, I started out my professional career actually as a dietitian nutritionist, and I worked in that area for a couple of years, and then my academic career before I came here was all sort of in what would be applied human nutrition here, but I was very much on the public health and community nutrition and health promotion side of things. So really starting from when I did my PhD, I was taking some courses in health promotion, and then I taught in that area throughout the time that I was teaching. And so, you know, my frame is very much that health promotion framework, looking at how do we promote health, how do we really prevent problems before they can occur, but doing that from a very, what we would call an ecological perspective. So, one of the frameworks that I used to teach was the ecological framework for health, recognizing that health is, it's affected by individual behaviors, but those individual behaviors themselves are grounded in our near environments, our families, our workplaces, which are themselves grounded in the culture and the society that we live in, the policy environment, and so on. And so to be well is not just a matter of teaching people to, in my context, eat better. Because we recognize that the ways people eat are so multi-determined. And I think from a mental health perspective, it's the same thing, that our mental health is also shaped by and determined by the context in which we live, both the near context and the far context. So then when we're looking at a workplace, that becomes key. In what ways is our workplace supporting our well-being, whether that's physical, mental, and I see those things as really intertwined too. We're not dealing with mental health here and physical health here and social health and so on. They all impact each other. But in what ways can our workplaces be the place where the healthy choice is the easy choice, where people feel supported and so on? And so in that way it kind of comes naturally to me.
Thank you for that, Gwen, and thank you also for the reminder of that physical, mental continuum that I think so often we're looking for dichotomies just so that it helps us compartmentalize things, but the truth is that there's such a continuum there, and actually in many ways that's making a return, the kind of holistic view it was something that was around in the earlier days, and now it's coming back in a strong way with new information. I appreciate that. Why don't we continue with the same question to the whole team? Maybe Steve, if you want to take a shot at the same context as Gwen was mentioning.
I think physical resources in particular, the concept of wellness is probably a little bit out of our comfort zone, and what brought me into the program to start with was recognizing that it was outside of our comfort zone, and there was going to be quite a process to become comfortable with it. And as time went on and we had more conversations about wellness, it became an easier topic to have conversations with people about it. And I would say the fact that I'm sitting here this afternoon would mean that it's moved into my comfort zone to some extent, because it certainly, for a lot of us, it would be at the start of the program and how we got there, it was completely, I wouldn't say foreign to us, but it definitely was not something that we naturally gravitated to.
Great points. Well, talking about comfort zone, Steve, it's great to see you in a suit and tie there. He's kind of reaching all sorts of new heights here, new thresholds, so good on that. Indira, and Indira, of course, is relatively new to the university. So we're putting a little bit in the spotlight here, but maybe a little bit about your own role, and even perhaps your past experiences that relate to workplace and wellness.
Thank you, Franco, and thanks for putting me on the spot today. Very much appreciated. I'm really pleased to be here because I think that this is an absolutely vital conversation for us all to have, and as you all know, this is really getting down to prevention. When you talk about workplace wellness and we talk about mental health issues in our society and community, as Franco said, it absolutely starts and the workplace plays a huge role in terms of how we feel about ourselves and how we move forward. And so this particular conversation is one that's important to me. It's interesting that today the Financial Post came out with a survey. Morneau and Chappelle actually just posted that of the people they surveyed, 60% of the people said that they would actually take jobs that didn't pay as much if they had and knew that they were supported with wellness in their workplace. I think that's so revealing, and it says so much about how we feel as human beings and how we feel as society. I'm the AVP of Diversity and Human Rights, and so my lens is perhaps, or my perspective is slightly different from some of the others you've heard so far. But absolutely, DHR is about creating an inclusive, accepting, and equitable campus and environment here for faculty, students, and staff. And so that is absolutely number one, and it is so important in terms of making sure that we are creating not just people who are successful at their jobs, but successful human beings. We do this, as you probably know, through education, through workshops, through training, through sometimes conflict resolution, which in my opinion is when everything breaks down, but also research and also building supports for people. My past experiences is a little different from many people in the room. I actually come from what some would call fast-paced and high-stress environments, and so those have been my workplace experiences. But the point about that, and the reason I bring it up, is because it is in those environments that you recognize very easily, very quickly, just how important a strong foundation of wellness is if people are going to be able to do their work and do it properly and feel good about the challenges that they're facing, not just every now and then, but sometimes hourly. I dealt in hourly newscasts, and those kinds of environments. So, what can we do to create supports? It has to do with building solid teams, solid frameworks for wellness, making sure that you create an environment where people feel like they are a family and they're working together as a family and they support each other. A similar kind of situation when I worked in government. A slightly different way of looking at it is that the responsibilities I had were in education, early learning and childcare, and status of women. So, building supports and services when it came to, for example, pay equity, sexual harassment and violence, also accessibility, but mental health when it comes to school systems. Also pay equity. I also worked in citizenship and immigration. So, being able to help newcomers to our province and country be able to integrate and feel comfortable so that they could actually reach their full potential and be able to contribute to the amazing fabric of life that we call Canada and our Canadian identity was so important. And so I just want you to know that I think that this is a key conversation, and it is an honor and a privilege for me to be here with you all today.
Well, thank you very much for that, Indira. And Indira is very modest and just kind of alluding sideways to what she's. She was a very high-profile national journalist for a time, and was elected to some of the highest elected political positions in our provincial government. So when she speaks of high-stress environments, whether you're speaking of journalism or politics, she's been one of the terms for those who work with me on a regular basis will hear me use very often is stress test. I use it as a bit of a matter. When we think of stress tests, we think of the heart stress test, but it's a very, in my mind, it's an interesting term to think about how our environments stress test us, right? And so, if you want to know how well your heart's doing, you push it to the upper limits, and there's going to be individual variability in how high that stressor can go without compromising the heart. Well, the same thing with mind and brain, right? And so we in some ways we're in the business of testing. That's what universities do. And so there's kind of an inherent reality around we're stress tested. I mean, all that. And I think that it's a reminder that there's an extra nuance in our environment because that's kind of the business that we're in, if you will. And so how do you create the conditions where people can thrive and perform optimally to the best of everybody, given that reality, and how do we remain sensitive to those stress tests that are sometimes inadvertently created in our environments, and sometimes unreasonable, sometimes reasonable. And how do you distinguish between those two? So thank you for that. Let me move on now to Irene, who connects and crosses paths with students all the time, and in her role. And maybe you could talk a little bit about this work in that context.
Thanks very much, Franco. And when you say the stress test in the environment, welcome to Student Housing Services. with our environment, we're playing home and creating a campus environment for roughly 5,000 students. We're primarily a first-year environment here, so picture 4,800 students who have very little life experience coming and joining us all here on campus, all coming together within a 2-day time span and trying to get their footing here on campus. So this is the kind of environment that I've worked in for the last 37 years. So I've seen a lot of change that's happened here on this campus, and it's very progressive and very rewarding to see this. I think I'm uniquely positioned within that environment because we're a 24/7, 365 environment. So we see our students as they're preparing for life. We see them as they're making their way, they're sowing their wild oats, they're trying to find out who they are. And our staff are working with these students, and many of our staff are embedded right in the residences, so they live and work within that kind of an environment as well. So it provides its own unique challenges. In student housing services, we also have a number of different bargaining groups that are part of our environment as well. So it gives me a perspective of what it's like based on the job function that you have within that environment. So we're complex, we're very dynamic. We help our students navigate all the different challenges that they experience, and consequently our staff experience that as well. So for me, the interest is, how do I create a safe environment for our staff? How do I create a learning environment not only for the students that they can gain their footing, they can develop some wellness skills as well, but also for our staff to understand the impact of taking on the needs of the students, providing education for them, but also being able to practice very good self-care for themselves and develop some boundaries for them. I'm also a mental health first aid instructor and have been doing that for a number of years, and it also has given me a unique insight into the stigma that's around. How do we break through stigma? How do we encourage people to actively engage with other people who may be developing a mental health challenge, a mental health problem within the workplace? How do we help people create that balance between physical, mental, and social for our students and our staff members here? I also have family members and friends that have lived experiences with mental health, and I think that has helped me understand what it's like for other individuals, but also shaped how I may think and how I may approach the work that we do within student housing services. It's been very rewarding to be able to help people through crises that they may be experiencing, to help navigate the different resources and to tie them with various colleagues here on the campus and within the community, and be able to walk side by side with them as they learn about themselves and as they move forward and accomplish the goals that they've all set out to be. I'd also like to say that I'm a member of the board recently for the local CMHA, and again, that's introduced me to the many, many opportunities that are available, but also the impacts of mental health and mental health problems within our community.
Great, thanks very much for that, Irene. And for those who aren't, CMHA, Canadian Mental Health Association, is the organization. And, you know, one of the challenges I think we have in Canada actually is, you know, working towards a common, you know, understanding at a national level. There's so much interprovincial differences, there's, you know, regional differences, and you know, the work with CMHA and organizations like that is hugely important in developing kind of common understanding of standards, you know, common standards from which we can all work towards. We have Allison, of course, with us, and who's you know, Director of Student Wellness. And Allison, maybe you could tell us a bit of your perspective, which is very directly linked to today's conversation.
Thanks, Franco, and thanks very much for the opportunity to participate today. As Franco said, I'm the Director of Student Wellness here on campus, and the University of Guelph. I've worked in post-secondary for, I tried to do the math and it was too much, so I'm not going to say, but for a long time, this is actually my third institution that I've worked at in student health and wellness, dating back to a health promotion role. And what I've always found interesting is the unique perspectives that students bring to campus and the multifacetedness of those students. But you can't really talk about student health without talking about staff and faculty health as well. That the university in itself is a community with many different aspects of it, and talking about them in separation, I think, is challenging in itself. So I think the conversation around staff and faculty well-being is well suited for that connection as well. Within student wellness services, most of you are probably familiar with our services over in JT Powell, student health services, counseling, accessibility. I'm not going to run them all off, but they're all over there under one building. So I think I can probably leave it. Like Irene mentioned, the other piece around health and well-being from a student health perspective is the health and well-being of the caregiver. And the roles not just in student wellness that people take on, but in other areas of the university that have direct impact on students, but also on staff and faculty. And I think that's an important consideration as we're talking about wellness overall.
Well, thank you very much for that, Irene. You know, some of the things that you said, you know, are a reminder, I think, for all of us of the complexity when we think about any individual and we refer to them as students or refer to them as staff or refer to them as faculty, when the reality of it is when it comes to health, they're people with a complex array of parts of their lives that come together. And so, you know, I even have a moment of pause sometimes when we talk about, you know, whether it's faculty or student or staff mental health or whatever it is, it's human mental health. That refer to, you know, the people that part of their lives are spent here as students, and it's just a reminder that the interconnectivity relationships, you know, interconnectivity, students, faculty, staff, students and their own families, their own relationships within and outside of the campuses, their lives are complex, and you know, it's an important element to think about. And sometimes we can sometimes gloss over that. We think about we put a huge premium on the university, you know, geographical environment, when in fact, you know, the things that are impacting on any of our well-being and health are complex and broad and array. And what can we do in this particular environment, you know, to support that? I want to switch to a foundational question around what does it even mean to create a healthy workplace? And just to tee it up, I'll just say that I think about these two words, healthy and workplace, and I actually think a lot about how we use words and how they change and evolve, you know, over time. So if you think of the word health, I would say 40 years ago, health was really defined by, it was almost interchangeable with medical. You know, it was your body, your physical health, I guess, in that sense. And with with determinants of health and our broader understanding of our interconnectivity with our environment, the animals around us, I mean, all of these things, you know, have come into play when we think about health. So there's an evolving. None of these words stay the same. They all change. They all evolve. So what does health mean today? What does healthy mean today compared to 20 years ago, compared to 40 years? And what will it mean, you know, 10, 20 years ago? These things are outside, they're dynamic. And I would say the same thing with workplace, the word workplace. You know, if you think about workplace, years ago I was on part of a group called the Global and Business Economic Roundtable for Mental Health. And it was all CEOs except for me, of big companies who were interested in mental health in the workplace. And part of it was how the workplace is changing. You know, workplaces are not the same today as they were. There's more flexibility. That can be a good thing, but with more flexibility also comes more uncertainty sometimes, you know. And so workplaces are evolving, the concept of health is evolving. So with that in mind, maybe we can talk about the concept, or what is the image of a healthy workplace here at this university, and maybe tell us about what you would see, hear, feel, and experience in that workplace. What would that look like? And maybe Alison, we can start with you.
Sure, thank you. I think first off, just on a very high level sort of on a high level, you would see a vibrant, happy, and engaged workforce with individuals who are satisfied with their work, that they are engaged in their work on a daily basis, that they practice personal health practices, right? And take opportunities throughout their day to employ those things. That they are not students that, in addition to being physically safe, individuals feel psychologically safe and supported in the work that they do. And that all members of the community feel that it is open, accessible, and accepting. I think to your point earlier about the mental health literacy piece, I think having a workplace that is high in mental health literacy and where people can recognize symptoms of mental health concerns, that they are knowledgeable of risk factors, and where they can seek out not only professional help but self-help, and that we have positive attitudes around mental health and help-seeking behaviors. That employees feel empowered to improve their health and are supported in doing so, and it feels safe for us to take risks in that. That there's a high level of collaboration and a continual improvement process that is ongoing and that people are engaged in, I think are all probably not all inclusive, but are elements of what a healthy workplace could feel like.
Thank you very much for that, Irene. And this is a tough one because it is an ongoing, moving target, just as we understand health. But and the mental health literacy piece, I think you mentioned, is a very important one. Irene, maybe can you comment as well?
I share a lot of the same kind of comments that Alison has here, but I started off my list when I was thinking about it as thinking of an environment that had a lot of laughter and a lot of spirit of camaraderie. We're so connected to our workplace, and so much of who we are is built into the workplace that you have. So really wanting to make sure that there's an opportunity there for relationship building and connections between ourselves, the people we work with, and the broader university as well. In my ideal workplace there, I was thinking that people needed to understand how they connect and how what they do is important to the broader university and to the department and to the mission of our department and beyond that. So they develop a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging. They understand the bigger picture. They understand that the unique value that they bring to developing things. And in that respect, I think years ago when I was in graduate school and stuff, we were talking about NASA and the kind of mindset that they have in NASA, that anyone from the janitor to the chief scientist there all had a common goal, and that was to put a man on the moon. And that's the kind of thing that we need to have, that connectivity, that people have an understanding that what they do, regardless of whether it's a porter at our desk, whether it's one of our residence managers, whether it's an associate director, all of us have a purpose here, and that's to support the goals of our students meeting their academic requirements and their life goals and everything else. So they have a sense of that value and they have a belief. They have a recognition of the impact on the social, mental, and emotional environments that are contained as members of our workplace here at the university. There is an opportunity to create balance. Sometimes I think in the work that we do in student housing, because we're so immersed in things, that we have a tendency to get off balance at times. And I think the ideal workplace needs to have colleagues, needs to have managers and others that help us right size for that help us become aware when we're tipping the scale in one direction or the other, and create that balance for us. We need a recognition in this ideal workplace as well of a one size fits all approach doesn't work, that we're all human, that the environment is dynamic, and that sometimes we need to make some changes and make some adjustments there. And that also goes in recognition of the policies and the procedures that we have. And we've made a lot of changes over the years, but I'm struck by some of the people I work with who are part of that sandwich generation where they're busy looking after parents, elderly parents, or younger children, and they seem to be squeezed at times. And even though we have really progressive type of policies, sometimes we need a little bit more opportunities to make some changes to make life work for them. I also see an opportunity to try new things, to see how work is done I had the privilege many years ago to be seconded into another department, so it gave me a perspective again how another unit works. We've also in my department had opportunities to bring in people from time to time to when one of our staff members has taken a job somewhere else. And it's been lovely to have the insight of other people, and we've built a bridge to another department there. And it has provided some cross-training opportunities. It's provided opportunities for people just to try new things and test themselves a little without making huge life changes and commitments. So all of those kind of things, I think the foundation of each one of those is the relationships that we bring and the connections that we make between units and people.
Great, thank you for that, Irene. And yeah, I think your experience in other areas is an interesting one, but it's also a reminder of perspective taking. You know, our environments are so diverse, they're so different. The mandates are different in different parts of the university. And even if you haven't worked in another environment, it's probably a good mental exercise to sometimes kind of try to put yourselves in the shoes of that particular department and the particular types of challenges that they have and how they're the same or different to your own. Steve, maybe do you want to comment?
Sure. I have to put a little plug in for physical resources as well about the beauty of the campus. I think there's a wellness component just to the place that we work every day. It's, in my opinion, it's probably the most beautiful campus, certainly in Ontario. And depending on the time of year, there's either a calmness about campus or an energy about campus. And I think both of those things can contribute to our individual wellness. And I also think about the staying power of the university for some of us that have come from other industries and what have you. The University of Guelph is going to be here in 100 years, and there's a wellness component to that I often think about. If I think about what I'd like to hear in the workplace, it's conversations about wellness. We need to raise the profile more, and there's a lot of people in physical resources and elsewhere that are on straight shift work. So they're midnight shift workers and really don't get much of an opportunity to come to an event like this. And so it's very important to have conversations and programming for them off of 8 till 4:30 shifts, and certainly over at the Vet College there's a high component of shift work as well. What I would like to feel on campus is the support. I think that's a word that continually comes up when we talk about wellness. There's often talk of more serious mental illness, but to a point that Irene made, sometimes it's just being overwhelmed, that it's not really, I'm not sure that you would call that mental illness, but if you are being squeezed by young children and aging parents, as the example that you gave, that it's a very real need, and it needs support, and that certainly, everybody has different challenges, and I think a real key thing that we would all feel is that there's a solution for everybody.
Thanks for that, Steve. Gwen or Indira, did you have any other thoughts on that?
I think my comments are just going to be very quick, but I envision walking through the campus and just feeling that dynamism, that energy, and that sense of people, as you touched on, Steve, of people supporting each other and really working to make sure that we're creating the kind of place and environment that is safe. And when I say safe, I mean safe in the sense of where people feel like they belong. And part of that, I think, is ensuring that there's an air of kindness and generosity and caring. That's how I would describe what we should be working towards.
I like the sound of that. Yeah. Places, physical resources. I appreciate you highlighting that. I'm a big believer in another expression, frankly, the power of places, and I really strongly believe in the incredible power of. If I asked anybody in this room to think about one of their most memorable experiences in their lives, it would be very unusual to have that experience detached from a place. an episode in your life. Places are so important, and I think our places are a real point of pride. I mean, I think we do have one of those beautiful campuses, and I think the almost sometimes unconscious inspirational effects of our places can sometimes be overlooked, and if you take a kind of a utilitarian square footage approach, to our needs, and we forget about the importance of aesthetics, of beauty, and the power of these things to really affect, how you're feeling that moment that you step onto the campus. And I would say it's one of the biggest predictors of your success on any one day is how energized, you're feeling, and anything that can contribute to that, sense of positive energy, I think is welcome. I don't know, Gwen, if you had any other. Because I'm going to start you off with, what are you most proud of? So maybe we'll start with Gwen on that one. Wondering, in terms of your college's journey towards enhancing wellness, maybe help orient us to what you're up to and some ideas there.
Sure. Well, when I think about what I'm most proud of, I think it's the overarching integrative approach that we've taken to wellness in the College of Social and Applied Human Sciences. When I first started as dean almost exactly 4 years ago, one of my first tasks was to lead the college through a strategic planning exercise. And out of that, we came up with a strategic plan to sort of guide us in what we're doing and the decisions that we make, over at that point, sort of the next 5 or more years. And as part of that, we framed our strategic plan around 3 main objectives. And one of those objectives was to be providing a supportive work and learning environment for our students, staff, and faculty. And so, and within that supportive work and learning environment, of course, is embedded the concept of wellness. So, our strategic plan is not one where we have objective 1, and these are the 3 actions related to that, and objective 2, and so on. It really is, again, much more integrative. So with that lens of supportive work and learning environment, we sort of look at all of the things that we're doing or planning to do or thinking about doing, and sort of thinking, okay, how does this support our goal of providing a supportive work and learning environment? Is this, and if it is sort of key in that, then that really sort of gives it a leg up. If we're trying to choose between 2 or 3 different actions that fit with the resources that we have available, if it supports wellness in the college, then that certainly helps. And I guess, within that, we have had a number of very specific initiatives that have been successful. We've implemented our annual fall faculty and staff family barbecue at the Arboretum in September. Somehow we've managed to come up with great weather every year. And it's just wonderful to see faculty and staff, their children playing on the lawn and intermingling. And actually, that last question of what does wellness at work look like, that image always comes to mind for me. We've also received at least one of those grants, the Wellness at Work grants, that have allowed us to put on specific workshops that are of interest to faculty and staff. We've recently implemented a personal strategic planning series of workshops for faculty, particularly thinking about mid-career faculty, but really we've found people at all stages have been finding it really helpful to come and spend some time reflecting on where they're at, what are their personal values and goals, and how can they sort of craft their career around that. So, thinking about the feedback we got from the Wellness at Work survey, what are the issues that we need to be addressing, and what are some of the specific initiatives we can take, but then also what are some of the cultural changes we can make, whether it's culture around sending emails or not sending emails at night or on weekends, culture around choosing to make sure we have other supports for people in the areas that they're feeling overworked. So lots of things in those areas.
Well, that's terrific. Thank you for that, Gwen. I'm going to open up to some of the others here, maybe to continue to answer that question, and Steve, if you want to take a shot at that. But also, right on the heels of Steve's comments, maybe to open it up and talk about any aha moment, like on that journey to creating that healthy workplace. What are some of the aha moments where you've experienced as you've worked in the culture in that context that are maybe took you back a little bit or surprised you. But maybe you could kick it off, Steve, with some of the things you've been up to.
Okay, so yeah, we're very proud of what we've done with the wellness program within Physical Resources. I think first off, we acknowledge how proud we are to work for an employer that even talks about wellness to the extent that we have, let alone put all the systems and programs in place. It's, if not unique, it's relatively rare, but I think within Physical Resources, we're very proud of our leadership group that identified the need for wellness. And one great example is in the fall of 2018 or so, we were establishing a new position around compliance, because there's a lot of government reporting and compliance things in Physical Resources. And we also saw it as an opportunity to have some compliance to wellness as well. So the position was supported as a manager of compliance and wellness, and it was around a conversation that if we're going to be serious about wellness, we have to treat it seriously. And we really felt that the only way to actually do that was to have it be part of somebody's job, and presumably in their title as well. And up to that point, it had kind of existed on the side of some of our desks, and we fit it in as we could here and there. So we hired Anne McDonald from the School of Engineering. She's sitting in the back, and through Anne's leadership and many other people, we established a group and don't work on days. So part of PR Life's goal, I think, was to create an energizing and engaging work life for all of us, but maybe a little bit more towards the people that aren't able to get onto or get to events that are typically scheduled from 8 till 4:30 or thereabouts. And a lot of the things that PR Life does are relatively simple. They're certainly low cost or no cost. Can be as simple as providing electrolyte freezies on the very hottest days of the summer because of grounds and other people that work outside and in hot environments. So it's just recognizing that some of these jobs really put the physical in Physical Resources, and it's seeing it more as a recognition of recognizing them as people and not just as working away. So in terms of an aha moment, there was a moment in October 2017 in the Wellness Kickoff Month, or a Healthy Workplace Month, I forget what we called it, but anyway, I did a class at athletics, and after the class, which was way outside my comfort zone, I'd never done a class in my life, but I went, I think it was Pilates or something like that. It was painful. And so after the event, and it was immediately after, because I do remember that I had a conversation with, I don't even know the person's name, but I'd seen them around campus lots of times, but it was a one-sided conversation because I couldn't breathe after the Pilates conversation. But it was a little bit uncomfortable because we were talking about the concept of the kickoff month to the wellness program and that type of thing. And this person made the comment that, well, it was great to have an athletics class. Really, for them, they had much bigger problems because of a family member with addiction. And I remember it was really, really uncomfortable, but it also made me think of the wide range of people on campus. We know there's a huge diversity on campus in terms of people's job function and just the many departments that don't have too much to do with one another, but are all under the umbrella of the University of Guelph. But it really made me realize that amongst the thousands of people on campus, that the concept of wellness would be wildly different among those thousands and thousands of people. And so hearing how big of a overwhelming factor that was to this person's wellness really opened my eyes that wellness could be as simple as being frazzled about getting to a specific time to pick up your kids, or dealing with really, really serious addiction issues. Not necessarily that person needed the wellness program themselves, but it was almost on behalf of their family members. And it also made me realize that a big part of the wellness program was actually an opportunity to spread the word about the EFAP. We always talk about EAP, but of course it's Employee and Family Assistance Program. And it was a major eye-opener to hear the path that person had to follow.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Steve. And again, it's an important reminder of the breadth when we talk about well-being of, and you know, what we're talking about. If you think about the goalposts or the capture the full spectrum, and as this conversation evolves and as we continue to raise our bar with programs, we need to kind of increase the magnification level, I think, on that full continuum, so that we understand the different needs of different parts of that of that continuum. I think it's so important. It was interesting. I'll always remember an event I was at that was organized by the students. It was a wonderful event. It was an event to raise awareness around mental health and coming out of the shadows, and it was just a really good, quite frankly, feel-good opportunity. Students came together. They invited me. I said a few words, and maybe influenced just by my background and work. After I was head of research, I actually ran the hospital for about 2 years. I was the executive vice president, ran all the professional programs, including the clinical. And I remember thinking, my mind just kept going there. I said, the sad reality of it is that actually there's a number of people who really should be here, who can't be here and aren't here, because they're curled up in the corner of their rooms really having a super tough time. So that's kind of one end, of the continuum. And even though it was a great, morale builder for us, it wasn't accessing that group. And I kept thinking about those people, right? And so what are we doing for them? So I think as we move forward, we need to think about those different compartments. You mentioned the addictions piece as well, and keeping in mind, for example, we talk about suicides. Something like 70% of suicides have some kind of drug on board in studies that have looked at that. So the relationship between substance use disorders and mental health challenges is something that we need to keep in focus as well. But are there any other comments? I'm just conscious of time. It's 3:50, and I do a quick time check. I want to make sure we get to some questions from the audience. I also want to get to challenges. So if there are any final thoughts on this particular question, then I'll move to challenges, and then we can get to some of the audience questions as well. Any final thoughts from any of the members of the panel on aha moments or things that we're most proud of? Good? Irene? Or Indira? No? Okay. What about challenges? Let's talk a little bit about that. It's not always easy to do this work, and cultural change takes time. It really does. It's one thing to talk about, it's another thing to actually implement, and then it's yet another thing for it to truly be, absorbed by your person. So it's really it's just deep in you when you think about it. And that's really cultural change. It does take time, and maybe we want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that people have faced. And Indira, maybe you want to comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the most important barriers to really be able to create the right environment and culture at work actually comes from what we're talking about today, which is let's talk, right? It's about ensuring that you have conversations with people and that you learn how to communicate. And so I found that sometimes some of the most challenging environments is what happens when people are working in silos, when people are actually not talking to each other, not sharing with each other. And so that can really lead to people actually feeling kind of lonely and sort of like they're working on their own and not feeling very well supported. And so one of the first things I tried to do, and I actually did with this team that I have, was have a meeting, but instead of talking about what we're going to do at work and what we're going to accomplish and our goals, which are of course very important conversations, we instead went around the room and just kind of talked about ourselves and our lives and so on. And I started out by, I thought I'd break the ice, so I probably told them lots about myself and more than maybe they needed to know. But I think it's important to create those bonds of friendship that can really lead to people understanding that when we're working with each other for 8 hours a day, we are there not just as colleagues working in our offices, but we are actually there to help each other, to support each other, and to help each other be successful. And it's been my experience that that is a key part of a productive workplace community. And this doesn't just stop, at the end of the day or lunch hour. I've often made it a practice to make sure that we're having lunch together, or sometimes you need to just go for a walk and, let's go for a coffee. Who wants to go and grab a coffee with me? Go for that walk, stretch your legs a little bit, get that little bit of exercise in, but then come back and, spend that time in that environment, but also supporting each other and not just making it relationships that happen just when we're driving our work forward or our goals. But you work hard, but you also spend time together. And to me, that's really key. And just one more thing I wanted to say. Of course, leadership is important, and leadership in terms of creating an environment where people feel like they are respected and accepted. But I want to say one thing. I think when we talk about wellness at work, and how we get through some challenges and barriers, we all have to recognize that we all play a role. And so every one of us has to arrive at work on any given day, understanding that it all goes both ways. I say this because one of the things I do in the morning, I'm a commuter, so I get in the car and I actually visualize and think about what kind of a day I want to have at work. And generally speaking, it's not about, some of it is about, I gotta get this done, and I gotta get that done, but the other part of it is, I wanna have a good day at work, a happy day, hopefully I'll have some good conversations and we'll get things done, and hopefully there'll be some laughter in the office too. I think someone brought that up, Irene, you did. So important to being able to break through those barriers and get people working with each other.
Well, it's a great point. I mean, we're all here because we're all successful people. We in our own right, in our own roles. But it is also a reminder that sometimes we got to kind of relax a bit and not take ourselves too seriously. I know that I try to do that all the time, but it's tough, right? Because you're drawn in by the black hole, the gravitational pull of the black hole of each of our jobs. I will say about the silos, I've reflected a lot over the years on silos and collaborative work together, as you can imagine. The team and I truly am absolutely kind of adamant about the importance of working together. Even from a practical point of view, you get a better product. I mean, you get more perspectives, right? But it's tougher. The natural default position for most individuals is to go the silo route. In the short term, it's easier to not make that extra effort, to connect. It's just a default position. Our jobs are defined. We have roles. We have, work definitions. So you're kind of naturally drawn towards that. The effort, it takes effort, and the payoff of that effort is a little bit down the line. It may, sometimes it's just easier to do. Just leave me alone. I got my things to do. I'll just get my head down and keep my head down and do what I need to do. That is often the default position. It doesn't allow you to get to that next bar of that work experience, and that really does come from others and the powerful effects of communities and collaboration and coming together. But other comments from the group. Gwen, go for it.
Yeah, maybe just comment that as I think about challenges, I think about all the stuff that gets in the way. So, we have our goals and we want to have the good conversations, we want to be there for each other, we want to have the laughter, we want to have work-life balance, we want to have manageable workloads. But then, so we try to create those environments, but then stuff gets in the way. Whether it's, a project that just has to get done, whether it's stuff that's going on in people's home lives, family illness, deaths, addictions, as people have talked about, and or people who, you know, for some reason aren't functioning in their role for, you know, often perhaps circumstances beyond their control. So, you know, I guess I just am aware that the wellness at work and our wellness programs are very much always a work in progress. And we have our goals and we have to sort of keep working towards those, but we recognize and have to acknowledge some of that stuff and then do what we can to deal with the stuff sometimes. And that may take time.
It's a great point, and it's also, you know, attributions. You know, we you know, when we're all in our, you know, we got to get something done. There's a deadline, and we all experience that. Experiences. My role no different than anyone else in this room. You know, just the details are different, but fundamentally it's the same principle we have. And you know, let's say something's not getting done because there's a, to use a chemistry term, a rate limiting factor. Someone in the chain of reactions is actually preventing the you know, the full expression of that job getting done. And your immediate attribution is usually a negative one. You're like, what the heck? You know, like, why is this person not pulling their weight? We don't go to the thought a little bit more of a little bit more generosity is not always the first thought it comes to your mind. You know, well, maybe there's something else going on in that person. You know, and maybe take that person and say, hey, listen, is there anything I can do to support or help? And change the kind of the tonality of the conversation a little bit. And sometimes when you do that, you might discover some interesting things that are completely different attributions that you might have otherwise expected. And so to kind of just momentarily slow down a little bit in those moments rather than doubling down on some, you know, attribution relating to individuals. And, you know, over the years, I'm sure all of us have come across so many examples of, oh, I thought it was this and this, but actually there's something else going on. So a little bit of that pausing and reflecting a little bit. Other comments on those challenges before we move on to I think we've covered collaboration and hopes and you know and aspirations. But I do want to actually, Indira, because you're relatively new here. Since you've just joined, it's always interesting when you get that fresh perspective. You think about the culture here. What type of culture do you hope we can work together to create in your own sense?
Well, you know, it's funny you asked me that, because I was actually thinking about this when we were talking earlier today and listening to Don go through the list of things that the university's done to really work in a very, you know, real way to address various aspects of wellness. And so one of the things that I've found since I've been here is this is really an amazing place with amazing people, you know, and there's no question that when you're the new person on the ground, you're facing a few challenges along the way. Many of you are aware that I've arrived for meetings late, lost in campus, you know, not really sure what building I'm supposed to go to or where I'm supposed to be. These are just the things that happens when you're new. And so one of the things that struck me early on was what a supportive community this is, and how understanding people are, and how willing they are to help out. And I can't tell you the number of people who have stopped me and said, how are you doing? How are you, you know, is everything okay? Do you want to go for lunch or coffee? So we are absolutely on the right track, and absolutely in the right track of trying to create the right culture here. From my perspective, I'm here because I really believe that we live in a constantly changing world. And in fact, I had the privilege of seeing Obama speak recently, and people asked him about mental health and what did he think was going on. And he basically said it was because of uncertainty. He said, we are finding that the foundation underneath us, or the ground essentially, is moving. Whereas our parents had the same job for years and years, and technology wasn't really moving fast and changing. They knew what they were going to do. They knew about their jobs. They knew about their pension plans. But instead, people today are dealing with this uncertainty about their jobs, about the future. New media and technology is changing at a rapid pace, and so we see all of those foundations developing cracks in them, but also our support networks in terms of human beings are changing. People are sitting in their rooms on a phone instead of actually going out and chatting with their friends and neighbors in real one-to-one conversations. And so all I'm trying to say with all of this is just that it is a dynamic world, and so we have to recognize that it's becoming more global. How are we going to come up with the right solutions in terms of some very complex problems? Absolutely, that has to start with getting along with each other. For taking the time to find out more about each other, and I'm not just talking about cultural diversity and so on, I'm just talking about your friends and neighbors who may come from a different place, or maybe, doing something different, or someone that you haven't spoken to. Just take the time out of your day to get to know that person, to find out a little bit more about them. And I think ultimately in the end, on a campus, the more open we are to different ideas and different ways of thinking and new people, and creating a sense of belonging and acceptance no matter who you are, the further along we are going to be, not just as human beings and how we get along with each other, but also in terms of what we're trying to establish here. So I see us working to create a culture of acceptance, inclusivity, but also comfort and warmth and caring. And so for me, that's where we are, and I want to see us do that regardless of where we're from, and possibly even what language you speak, or what kind of gender issues they may be, or and so on. It really gets down to just making sure that we just get it. We have to respect each other and get along. Let's just get on with it.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's interesting you talk about uncertainty. Most people here, I suspect, if you ask most people, when you think about uncertainty, if you did a word association game or something, what's the first word that comes to your mind? A lot of people would say fear, And as some of you have heard me talk about, I talk about the downside of uncertainty and the upside of uncertainty. The downside of uncertainty is the oldest fear that exists in humans, and that's fear of the unknown. When you're facing uncertainty, the other side of that is the unknown. And it's completely normal to withdraw, back off, and avoid and hold up. The upside of uncertainty is one of the oldest positive energies that humans have, and that's the spirit of exploration and discovery, hope, right? And it's interesting to me that our language these days have kind of shifted to the downside of uncertainty. When we talk about uncertainty, it's kind of a negative. When Christopher Columbus got on on his 3 ships there, it was all upside of uncertainty. It was, you're going to fall off the edge, whatever, we're going. There's hope and discovery. So despite all the negative, it's how do you create, how do you create that sense of upside of uncertainty? And we live in a very anxiogenic time. Right now we hear about anxiety, and a lot of it is related to that downside of uncertainty, inability to kind of feel like you have control. It's you have a tiger by the tail. This world's kind of going off in all sorts of directions, very different from our parents. I'm a big believer in adaptation. I think this is a generational transition, and I think that and you're already seeing it. We will adapt. Humans do adapt. They adapt well. This is the change is the new normal, as they say, but the speed with which we adapt has a lot to do with our openness and understanding these different perspectives and connecting with others. So it all comes back to one of our strategic themes, connecting communities, and really understanding different communities, showing that bit of compassion, that generosity, even though your first reaction might be, one to pull back. One more open question to the panel, and then we're gonna switch to questions, and we'll have about 15 minutes for some of the questions that have come forward. Next level of thinking. What do we need to do to continue moving forward towards this vision of a healthier workplace? And maybe Allison, we can start off with you, and then have others jump in: Gwen, Steve, Indira, and Irene.
Sure, thank you. I think essentially you started a really good base to start from. A lot of effort's gone into conversations, et cetera, and I think those conversations need to continue with maybe perhaps digging a little deeper into some of the issues that people are feeling around workplace wellness. that needing a strategic plan around, and I think the goals that Dawn outlined earlier on for the Wellness at Work are right in line with what I was thinking in terms of the next layer around the discussing some of the more challenging issues around workload, issues connection to burnout and impact on productivity across the various areas, as well as discussion and collaboration around balancing workload and wellness, continuing in that light. I think that's what I have to say.
Thank you for that. Other thoughts? Steve?
As I get around campus, I realize that some groups on campus have more wellness than others, and that maybe some departments are more in support than others. So I think there's probably a need to almost make it more of an automatic, that it is just a pillar of the University of Guelph, and that's how it is. Whether an individual person believes in the strength in the program or not, it's for everybody, and everybody needs to have access to all the great things that come from it. And I've actually had some conversations lately with prospective employees, and the concept of that was an eye-opener to them, that the University of Guelph had as much of a framework as we have. Of course, it can be more, but it was impressive to new employees, not necessarily about the individual things that we do, but the fact that we have the conversation.
Thanks for that, Steve. Anybody else? Gwen, did you?
Yeah, I think just very briefly, some of the words that come to mind when I think about the moving ahead is integration, infusion, so that wellness is kind of infused in everything we do. And yes, we need some standalone programs to help support that, but it again just I think needs to be well integrated in all of the sort of life and work of our programs.
Great, thanks. Please.
Yeah, I think that we have a pretty good sense of the vision that we're trying to create at the U of G, and the question is, how do we get there? So from my perspective, especially when I'm thinking about DHR, it really is about giving staff, faculty, and students the tools and resources that they need to be successful. The reality is that these questions are not just static. These things and the things we're talking about and the situations we're in, especially when you're trying to create a workplace culture or environment, are actually changing constantly. And in order for us to be able to keep up, we have to have a solid track of training, of education, of resources, workshops, that sort of thing, continuing the network and the conversations, ensuring that people understand how important it is to try to create that atmosphere of wellness and really support each other when people are perhaps not feeling that good, and ensure that we are doing that together. So from my perspective, certainly when I'm talking about my office and the things that we're working on, fostering a true sense of belonging and inclusion on campus is huge. And I just want to go to something that I think you touched on briefly, Franco, when we talked a little earlier in the last answer. We're talking about taking the time to support people and learn about this and, find out what their traditions, cultures, or background may be, and so on. The reality is, and something we all have to understand, it's not a one-way thing. When you do that and have those conversations, you're not just taking the time to listen to someone, you're actually getting something back in return. And what those experiences and that empathy does, and that knowledge acquisition does, it actually enriches us. You don't have to walk that person's journey in order to understand perhaps the challenges that they're facing and be able to really think about that. And I'm just going to put this out there since we're talking about it. There's a lot of conversations right now about the coronavirus, and I think we should be thinking about how we can support various people on our campus who may be feeling a little bit vulnerable right now, and ask them how we're doing. Some of the students, some of the faculty, some of the staff that we think may be dealing with family and so on in far off places, who may actually be feeling more challenged and vulnerable now than ever before. So this goes to that idea of creating the right kind of supports for people here.
A great point. You know, the coronavirus, what an interesting case example, right? You know, the two biggest issues right now with the coronavirus, at least here in Ontario, are two things. One is misinformation, right? And two is stigma and racial profiling. You know, it's known, the Associate Chief Medical Officer indicated yesterday, right, Allison and David were there, that every current case of the 2019 coronavirus, because the coronavirus is a family of viruses, this particular version, all of this particular version can be traced back to Wuhan, every case. Despite that, there's all sorts of stigma and racial profiling. I understand that there was some petition or something that emerged at one of our neighboring universities and things. These are, you know, those are exactly the kind of thing that you're talking about, Indira, and you know, a good example of a stress test for, you know, culture of wellness and you know, on our campus. That is the coronavirus is a stress test for it. I remember the SARS. You talk about, oh my goodness. The fracture lines, I mean, it was so much more chaotic than what this feels like right now. Not to say that things may or may not, you know, get more tough, but just the way we're dealing with it, there's so much more coordination, preparedness, and it's great to see that. And David and Allison have been a big part of that. I want to switch now to the questions. We've got about 10-15 minutes here just to kind of wrap things up. And we, of course, don't have time to go around all of the questions, but some questions were submitted, and maybe we could, I could kick it off with some of the questions for the panel and that came from the audience that you could comment on. One of them was, we know how connected we feel with others, and our sense of belonging is a key predictor of psychological health, our sense of community, a sense of belonging. Is a predictor of psychological health and well-being. How have we been able to foster a sense of connection, belonging within your department? So what have we done, you know, in our groups to promote that? I don't know if anybody wants to take a stab at that.
Thank you. So we started right out during the interview process. If a candidate is interested in working with us, we try to give them a sense of what our department is all about before they even arrive, so that they understand what makes us up, what our values are, whether they might be interested in working with us. But we start also in onboarding. We will go person to person throughout our department and make introductions there, and try to start that conversation, try to find commonalities between people. Part of our onboarding process for managers also includes the new manager coming in and working in all the different job areas in our department, so they have a sense of what makes up the department, who are the people that are here as well. Again, trying to encourage linkages and relationships there. We also like to have celebratory engagements in our department as well. So we have our annual holiday celebrations, we have a summer barbecue, we have potluck lunches periodically over the course of the years. And these are all put together by staff members, and it's something that's really looked forward to, and we give ourselves permission to take time away from the work environment, and when we can operationally close down so that we can get together, we can celebrate all the different accomplishments that we've had over the course of the year. Personally, what I also do is I try to acknowledge milestones among our staff members as well. So if there's something that they're celebrating, whether it's a birthday or an anniversary, to the extent that they've shared with me before, and I know, I like to acknowledge them. So they, as an individual, have worth, and I like to acknowledge the special things. We also do what I call gotcha cards. You know, we're always catching people doing things wrong, so this is the reverse, looking out there and catching them doing things right and celebrating the things that they do. We have little rewards that we have, coffee and muffins. It's not an expensive thing, but it's a gesture that really lets them know that they're valued and they're connected within our environment.
Great, thanks for that. Any other thoughts Steve, please.
The programming committee for the Wellness at Work group, we talked regularly about extroverts and introverts. And there was one person that really kept us on. She was representing the introverts. That we plan a lot of events that they're wellness events, but almost requires you to be a little bit of an extrovert to really take advantage of it. And so we were very conscious when we programmed things to make sure that we had something that an introvert could enjoy. And I think the deeper message on that was whether you're willing to put yourself out there and do something on a more public basis about wellness, or whether you just want to very quietly participate, or just even know that the wellness program is there, should you want to use the supports that are available, that there really is something for everyone, and it's not all about a very public event, that you might not ever even utter the word wellness, but take a lot of comfort from knowing that it has a bit of an insurance policy that it's there if you need it.
What a great point. I mean, I think in general we live in a bit of a, I would say, extroverted bias, culture and environment. And what you're saying, I think, plays itself out at so many levels. It's interesting. I had a chat with a parent of a friend, a parent of one of the students who's also a friend. And this student came here because of the programs that we offered. And actually, this person's biggest struggle is that he's an introvert. He likes it. He's not inclined to participate in a lot of the, positive energy, go. And actually had a tough time during orientation, because of that. It's just not, his comfort zone. And we talked about that. How do you create spaces? And so it's sometimes easy to lose sight of that. We just think, there's a universality to being engaged and having a great time, and of course it's all amplified by social media and all that. But to make sure that we create space for the diversity of individual variability and the realities of individuals. There's another question here. What are the particular skills or abilities that you're bringing that are helping to advance workplace wellness? So I guess there's a bit of specificity to this. And how can we help foster these campus-wide to support change making? So what are particular skills or abilities that we're bringing to help advance wellness? Is there a different, kind of skill set that we need, or not different, but is there a particular kind of skill set that needs to be enforced or encouraged?
Some things that immediately come to mind. I think compassion and empathy, listening skills. But I think also team building and facilitation skills. So I think that wellness is not something that is all top-down, charismatic leader driven and so on. And so those are some of the skills we need to pay attention to as we're working in this area.
It's a great point again, because if you think about it, those are tougher skills, they're a little softer. Quite frankly, as a leader, it's often a lot easier to just give the marching orders. Here you go. This is what we need done. Let's move on. Let me know how it goes at the end of the week. Doing what you just described, Glenn, takes energy and it takes comfort. There's a level of individual comfort you need in those roles. I'll answer also the question from my perspective in my role. It's interesting. As a university president, I would say there's different ways of describing how I experience my role, but I would say one of them is that anything I say or do is kind of multiplied by 100. If I bump into someone in the elevator and they tell me about this idea they have, and I say, hey, that's cool, I like that idea. Elevators, I find out later that I have a parent that approved the program, so things can be kind of multiplied by an order of magnitude. And also on the negative side, right? If there's moments of tension, I think in the senior, the more, and that's true for all of us. Depending on where you are in the organizations, things can get amplified, even though they're situational, they're in the moment, and then they take on kind of a life, sometimes it can take on a life of their own. It's very difficult on the people because in the meantime, those are old tapes. People moved on, it was situational, but sometimes the impressions, oh, what's going on, what's going on in the executive team or whatever. And so I spend a lot of time actually kind of compassion, sauce. I say, listen, because it's sometimes difficult, right, to be getting this sense that things are actually seen a certain way when they're actually, different. So those are the kind of, challenges you get. I think we all experience them in our own way on our teams, right? There's certain yes, there's moments of tension. We work through them. Sometimes they're healthy tensions. Sometimes they're not healthy tensions. That's true too, right? But when they are healthy tensions and you work through them, you want to feel good about that. But in a big complex organization, there's layers of communication and noise that sometimes can persist, and that's where you really have to pay attention to your people, to your groups, and bring that collective sense of common purpose, so we don't lose sight of the gains that we're making. I'm conscious of time. I want to end by just first of all thanking the panelists. This is a broad topic. I think we've done about as good of a job as we could, trying to touch on the big themes. Thank the audience for being a part of this. And Don's wearing the hat. Actually, before you come up here, before we leave together today, I just want to say one other thing between now and then. I want to make sure that we get a photograph, actually. And if you wear your hats, I'd love to send it back to Mary Deacon, just as a kind of a little, thing that we could try. I want to end with, when I first arrived here at my installation, I said, I had a statement, and I said, the world needs more of the University of Guelph. And it was a very deliberate and thoughtful sentence that I used. And I wasn't at the University of Guelph, but I was coming, I said, the world needs more of the University of Guelph. And it's kind of like, well, who are you to tell, I said, the world needs more of the University of Guelph. But really what I was saying, my impression of the things that the University of Guelph has, the values, the principles that drive this, are what attracted me to the University of Guelph. And since I arrived, those values, those things are something that has been reinforced over and over and over again here. And I still believe out there the world needs more of the values, the things that define our culture, that special distinctiveness that we have. I would also say, though, that as the years have passed, that it's also a high bar responsibility that we have. That we're very proud of our distinctive culture. We're very proud of connected communities. We're very proud of our community. And it's also a responsibility. It's a very high bar. It's something we should not take for granted. And it's easy to habituate. We're and it's easy to let your guard down. Like any good thing, and it's true in any relationship, you need to nurture it. If that's something that we believe in, you have to feed that sense of ourselves and not just take it for granted. So I believe that today, 6 years into my time here, the world does need more of the university, especially today's world. There's just so many, uncertainties, things that we've talked about, the difficulties, and the values that we have are values that can be infused in a very positive way. And we just need to remind ourselves of that and not take those good fortunes of who we are for granted. So on that note, thank you all so very much. Don probably wants to say a few words. And I don't want people to go away. I want that photograph up here. And if you have your hats, we should all put them on.
Okay, so here's your charismatic leader. I was reluctant to put the hat on. I thought it might mess my hair. Anyway, I do want to thank Franco and our panelists here. You've done a great job sharing your experiences and your efforts to enhance the workplace wellness at your college or department. I really appreciate that. What I heard today is that workplace wellness is a team effort, that we all need to work together and take action to help create the workplaces that we're all proud to work in. And don't go yet, I'll lock the doors. I do want to highlight a couple things about what's coming up here in the next while. You do see a calendar every month, and February is going to be another busy month. And we have it up. I'm just going to touch on a few things. On February the 6th, the university is hosting a lecture, Uncharted speaking tour with an NHL player, Daniel Carcello, who played with the Chicago Blackhawks. He's going to be talking openly about his mental health challenges, so that could be quite interesting. One that I'm particularly interested in is at Zavitz Hall, Creative Self-Love Workshop. Interesting. Other things that are underway, you and I'll go to that one together. We're offering a hot beverage. There'll be a coffee break later on. Take your break together in February. We've had that in the past. We'll be launching the Wellness at Work grant and other things that will be going on. I won't touch them, but again, if you want to become a champion and organize things in your area, appreciate that. We would appreciate that as well. I have the hat on. You heard bits and pieces about Bell Let's Talk. So tomorrow is Bell Let's Talk Day. And I really hope what you heard today will help you commit to an action that you're going to help to take to enhance your workplace culture. Large or small, everything that you do can impact your campus community and can help shape our culture. So before we leave a bit here, I'm going to put a short video on from Bell Let's Talk that shares some actions that you can take to take care of yourself.
I have not learned how to beat my illness. I have not learned how to cure my illness, but I have learned how to live with my illness.
We live in a world now that it feels like as if we always have to be on.
I have learned to cope with my illness by saying, okay, it will pass.
The little victories come from understanding that it is perfectly fine. You have every right to take care of yourself, to take a day off.
It may take a day, it may take 2 days, but it will pass. Similarly, I have learned to celebrate a good day.
Do things that make you happy, things that set your soul on fire, the things that you love.
I love tea. So tea for me is my self-care time. So I would have some tea, I'd disconnect from the internet, I'd call a friend up, I'd call my family, I'd pet my cats, or I'd run outside.
Movement is my medicine. For me, moving every single day, being in nature, getting outside, moving in my body is something that triggers a different chemical response. And when I am feeling like things are getting dark, when I don't understand what's going on in my own head, I know the first thing I can do is get outside and go for a walk. It seems really simple, and it is not going to fix things. It is not going to completely heal me, but it is a big step for me every single day to keep my mental wellness in check.
I have learned how to not make a bad day worse. I cherish a good day without fearing what happens if tomorrow's not a good day. And that is an acquired skill. You have to learn to live for the moment, live for the day, and don't fear tomorrow.
Ultimately, you need to take care of yourself. You have to love yourself.
So I would ask you to give some thought to what are you going to do to commit to your own mental wellness. So just think about the messages that you saw there and the advice given. Give it some serious thought in terms of what you yourself are going to do to improve your own mental wellness. Finally, okay. So again, thank you to all of you for coming out this afternoon. We had a really good turnout, and I don't know how many were watching online, but I hope many more. If you have any questions or comments, new ideas, want to become a champion, want to talk about anything, the Wellness at Work coordinators' emails on the screen there, what's on the website, please take a look at that. Tomorrow we will have Bell Let's Talk Day here on campus. There will be a booth in the UC, and join the conversation online tomorrow to help raise money and awareness for mental health support across Canada. And to Franco's point, we gave you the hats, so please, would you please put them all on and come on up here.